people to talk together and brainstorm and support each other to think through some of those situations and come up with solutions. And as I said, all of those will be documented. We'll send all of the notes, not just the ones from your group, but all of them back out to people. So you'll be able to see the brainstorming that happened in all of the different groups. And that will also be given back to the group that's working on some of those support documentation for providers and for people, so they can use some of the great ideas that you come up with to also give to providers and let them know some things that can be helpful. But I think it'll be a really good chance, if you've got some unique situations in your mind, like how the heck could this work with this provider, you can have a chance to talk that through with some people. It'll be kind of like a little COP. It's going to go pretty quick because there are, quite a few areas in your small group. If you want to look at focusing in on a couple areas that really stand out to you, that's okay. Or if you want to go through and try and get some suggestions for as many categories as possible, that's great too. So we'll kind of just see how it goes and where people's minds are once they've seen those. But it's really, really important that you have either watched live on Facebook or watched that recording before a staff come to that session, so that they know the details of what's going on. On the template that the people running the breakout groups have, it'll have a little rundown and synopsis, so we can kind of refresh people's memory, but it'll be really good to have already thought about it a little bit beforehand. So as soon as I have that link, I'll send it out, or again, you can watch it live on Facebook as it happens. You can also go onto Facebook after any live session if you have access and view it that way, but I'll try and get another link as well. Hannah?
I know there were some questions earlier on of us not attending on the Zoom and only watching on Facebook. Is that still the guidance so that providers can be on the Zoom? Just wanted to verify before I send the Zoom to staff.
Yes, yeah, none of us should be on the Zoom itself. You can either watch the link that I send out later, or you can watch it live on Facebook. There's not a cap for how many people can watch it live on Facebook, but there is a cap on Zoom. So we want to save those spots for the providers to attend. Any other questions or suggestions or thoughts about the session?
So
all right.
It looks like Toby has a question. Have there been any changes to the draft after stakeholder engagement?
I'll give that
would
to
be
Tammy.
Amy or Tammy.
Or Amy. I didn't see Amy there.
Yes, absolutely. There were significant changes.
Thanks, Amy. And then Christine is asking, did you state the date for the CCR training?
It's next Wednesday, the 12th, from 3 to 5. And if you don't, or any of your staff don't have an invite for that, let me know, because everybody should have received an email telling them that they would get an invitation that I sent yesterday, and everyone should have received the invitation today. So if somebody doesn't have it, let me know, or you can feel free to forward the invitation to them too. And Shannon?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Probably for Tammy. So, and we might have discussed this, I can't remember, but we're starting the Intro to Registered Family video virtual trainings this month. Do we just do life as normal, and then the licensors will be there? Is there going to be what are they going to say to these new guidance, and that they're coming, or I'm just not sure what that piece will be when we do this in between implementation.
Yeah, that's a good question, Shannon, that I hadn't thought about before this moment when you asked it. So I think I'm going to have to work on that a little bit and work on figuring out how that fits into the Intro to Registered Family. I would assume that they're already doing some, because there are some Intro to Registered Families that have already been happening virtually. So I would assume that they have been covering COVID requirements in some manner. But I will put that on my radar to figure out. I have actually, Ronnie Pham is going to be back at work this week, so I will put it on Ronnie's radar.
Thank you, Tammy, and thank you, Shannon, for bringing that up. That's a really important piece. Are there any other questions? I am looking at the videos to see if anyone's waving their hands. Not seeing any. Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks, Tammy, Amy, and Sydney. Really appreciate those updates and where we are. Okay, so Preschool Promise, Andy and Dana Young. And so, Andy, shall I give you the screen?
Yes, we can do that, and pull up that slide.
Okay, sounds good.
So just give me a second before I start sharing anything.
Okay, that's all right.
There'll be some blank time.
Okay, you are now. Okay,
great. I will do that. Let me press this button, and we're going to do this. Just have to. The problem with having 3 screens at home is figuring out how to what to share and when and where it's coming from, if that makes sense, folks.
You didn't mean to share that, did you, Andy?
I
don't know what happened.
Anything right now?
No.
Great.
not yet.
About now.
Yes.
Yes. Great. Okay. Because I can't see people's faces anymore, so everybody can feel free to roll their eyes at me, or whatever else you need to do. So we just wanted to check in because we have been getting questions and fully understand around, can I contact the providers in my region that have received an intent to award? And what we're still saying at this point is because the RFA applicants who have been notified that we intend to award them funds for Preschool Promise programming have not been confirmed yet, that we are asking for folks just to hold off a little while longer. So right now, where we are in our timeline is that we are still technically in the appeals process. Appeals have been submitted. The time for submitting an appeal has ended, but we're in the process of putting together the information, and then the Early Learning Council will review that information, and there will be decisions made as to whether any of those appeals have been approved. And that may change intent to award situations. And then after that, then we begin our contract negotiating and execution of them, of those contracts. And so until those contracts are confirmed, there still could be changes in who is awarded. We may have people who we intend to award who have reevaluated their situation and have decided that this is not the year for them. But we also may have some additional funds that come out of that. So there may be people who are added to that. So we're just saying that prior to the executed agreements, that the work of the CCRNRs was really around understanding the scope, learning the program models, and then supporting that connection that we will be helping you all with. So what I want to also emphasize is that once those agreements are executed, we will be letting you know who in your region is a Preschool Promise provider, and what our intention is and our goal is to be giving you information not just about who they are and who to contract there, because that's information we're going to learn from the contract execution process. Right now, we have information on who submitted the RFA. Usually it's a fiscal person if it's a larger entity. In those smaller entities, it probably is the same person you would be contacting. And then giving you some information on that program. So knowing a little bit about the profile of that program, we hope will be helpful in your initial conversations with them. We do know that in some regions that people who have been notified around intent to award are contacting you guys, which I think is great. And what I would just say is that understanding and getting to know and relationship building is always supportive, but also being very careful, because we have no expectation that you would be guiding them through the grant execution process. And so you can really refer any grant questions around that back to us. But really, I think sharing information about who you are, what you do, and how you anticipate being able to help them once their grant is executed is an appropriate response. I'm kind of taking a look at the chat box, and I see, Karen, you're talking about planning and orientation with partners. Absolutely. When will this information be finalized for the awards? It's hard to say, because in the grants manual, the grantees have up to 90 days to execute their contract. So there may be some staggering involved, depending on how quickly folks want to move ahead with those things. Mary, I see that you're saying that you're planning for next week and would like to at least send a letter to Preschool Promise programs. Again, we can't confirm who is a Preschool Promise program at this time, so I'm not sure what you wanted to put in your letter or how we could work through that. And we might be able to talk to that a little bit more one-on-one, just because we can't confirm to whom that letter should go to right now. Dana,
Andy,
did you want to add anything? Go ahead.
Andy, Jerry's waving her hand, Jerry Wolf, so she wants to speak.
Sorry, Jerry.
Hey, so we already met with ours with our early learning hub last week. So our goal for that was just relationship building, to talk about we're a group that acknowledging that people did not have contracts, but that we were all a part of this potentially around this amazing Preschool Promise opportunity. We talked about what the early learning hub's role was around coordinated enrollment and kind of they're still learning kind of thing. We talked about what the CCRR's role was going to be, and we just talked about how when you start something new, it's messy, and to be tolerant with that. And it was about people getting to know each other. And we set up weekly calls. So the goal of that again was not to to help people to have some a group to kind of say, I don't know about this, but what does anybody know about that? So that people are not operating on their own, but really we can just kind of say, rest, relax, this is what we're hearing, it's coming, so forth. Is that inappropriate?
No, I think that the message around new things are messy and rest and relax, things are coming, and relationship building is appropriate. I think my intention is just to remind us all that until contracts are executed, that the direct TA is not expected at this point. And also to really try and support you guys in not getting into situations where without an executed agreement and a confirmed Preschool Promise provider, that you're not in a position where you are getting in the middle of the grant negotiation process, because that's not fair to any of you or helpful in that process.
Okay.
But I think,
what we're trying to do is normalize that what you wrote in your application is not necessarily exactly what you will do. And that's normal. Like you proposed this, but once you enter into contract negotiations and you get your guidelines, that will be define what it is that you're actually doing. Again, that's the messy part, and we're trying just to help people to, again, be prepared that that's normal in a grant. So, because a lot of these people have never done grants, participated in a grant process. And so anyway, again, it's sort of just about relationship building, and like, here's what we're hearing. Because I think our people are feeling like they're out there on their own, and what's going on, and and what should I be doing? And again, that's what we're trying to do in our calls.
Sure, that makes sense. Thanks, Jerry.
Okay, thanks.
So Andy, I just thank you, Jerry and Andy. I just want to mention there are a few other areas that want to set up these similar kinds of meets and greets and orientation. So I know it looks like Nancy's region, as well as I think Shannon and a few others. So it sounds like the relationship building piece and just preparing is okay. It's about giving people guidance on contract negotiations, or TA at this point in time until staff are hired. Is that what did I say that right? Just for clarification.
I think that that's where we would all feel most comfortable. I would invite Dana to jump in if she has some different thoughts. But yeah, and just kind of emphasizing again that that an intent to award is not a grant, an executed grant. And so just being, making some really smart decisions and keeping that in mind as you're having conversations with people who may become Preschool Promise grantees. And, you know, like Jerry said, this process can feel very messy, and we're also in a time where it isn't, because of outside influences we have no control over. There are some timeline pieces, and then there's also some, I'm sure, a lot of people wanting to think more about how will they implement Preschool Promise under the current situation that we're all in, which are other conversations and questions too. So I don't ever want to discourage partnerships and communications, but I also just want everybody to have as much transparency and clarification around expectations and roles as we dip our toes into this work together.
Thanks, Andy. There's a few, Dana, were you going to respond? Go for it. Sorry.
Yeah,
thank you.
No worries. Just to go ahead and add a little bit. I think first of all, thank you, right, for starting to go ahead and get this meeting set up, and really that partnership building, relationship building. We know that it's going to be super important. I do want to go ahead and just provide a little bit of clarification on this contract negotiations, because technically speaking, there is no negotiations with this grant that we have. It's like we put out a grant that says we're offering you 6 slots at this amount. And then in the interim, we have gone ahead and sent out a startup funds kind of to go ahead and help us develop a formula. But I do want to make it clear that there's not going to be this back and forth negotiations. So as you guys are, talking to your grantees and they're like, I don't know, Eva, this amount doesn't seem right. I'm not really sure what I think I should do. I do want to make sure that there is no negotiation. We have put out on the intent to award what we have available based on our funding levels and stuff. Are we going to go ahead and have grantees that are going to want to lower their amount of slots because of whatever reason? That's going to go ahead and happen, right, given the current pandemic. But just kind of keeping that in mind. So I do appreciate that. And really right now, as you are developing that relationship building, is encourage them to go ahead and fill out that startup fund survey. Super quick, super simple. We receive a high response. So within a day, we had 50 that came in. So lots of interest. So I will say that is one message that you can continue sharing. But really what's going to happen after the appeals process, or grants team is going to go ahead and send out that contract, and then the grantee has 90 days to go ahead and sign per rule. That's in statute. That's on our Preschool Promise rules. We hope that grantees go ahead and sign that right away and we get those back right away, but technically they have 90 days, which two things that have been coming up, as Andy mentioned, is what is the model? What is preschool going to look like for next program year? So that's something that internally we have started the work. And also, what's the latest day that a program can start? That's something that we are working across teams too. So yeah, just to go ahead and add on that. But thank you all for such a great work. And yeah, I know that there's a lot of unknowns right now. We have a lot of grantees there. Thank you.
Thanks, Dana. And I'm starting to get chat Tourette's. again. So with all the chats coming in, what I'd like to ask is all of those who have been sending chats, if your question did not get answered, let me know. Karen Hinkemeyer.
My question, I had a couple. One was, if school districts are assuming they can go virtually with Preschool Promise because that's what they're doing for other grades, how is that fair to those that are certified family that are actually caring for kids? That's one. And then two, we have a Preschool Promise awardee that has several valid complaints, and I don't understand how they could participate in Spark. And so I need a better understanding of how to work with a program when they've been awarded something that they can't even participate in Spark. So those are my two things.
Well, the first one, Karen, I can go ahead and address because I think it speaks to another thing I think I saw from Eva. As you know, we talked about how there will be new guidance coming out on August 14th. And that really is around all programs. But for state-funded programs, so that would be OPK and Preschool Promise, we are in the middle of a process of looking closely about what could modified services look like for programs and learning more about what programs are able to do and then developing some guidance for programs to think about how do modified services look in our programs. And so that would also, within that guidance, address the 900 hours. It would address, guidance for programs if they have questions such as, I'm comfortable having 10 children in my program, but 7 families aren't comfortable with their children being there. How do I still provide services? So we are working on guidance on that currently that we just began the work at about 8 o'clock this morning, so it is new. So that's pretty much the scope that I can share right now. And we're working very closely with Miriam around the different options that there may be and how we'll be engaging with stakeholders around that information. So more to come on that for sure. And then as far as the second question about a program that has an intent to award but has some licensing compliance issues, we're working very closely with licensing to understand the scope of any issues that may have come up and using the same rubric that we used for the RFA process and determining eligibility for Preschool Promise. I don't know, Dana, if you wanted to add anything else.
I was going to add a little something into that just because ongoing, Karen, and I don't know how well known this is, but with Spark rating and publicly funded programs, there was a process in place because this kind of thing could come up, it could come up in the process to apply for an opportunity like Preschool Promise, or it could be a situation where some violation occurs down the line where they've been implementing Preschool Promise for some period of time. And so there is an internal process that occurs to take a look at, if there's a violation of some sort, how significant is it? They have I don't know if it's a rubric, but they have a process they go through as far as deciding when someone loses their Spark rating and then what that does to their opportunity to continue to be a publicly funded program. And so I'm imagining that this process will happen in a very similar way. But if the situation, which I think what you're highlighting is that there were things that were already on that list and then they were selected, there is still process going on around those situations, and that's why we have intent to awards, and some may arrive with an award and they may have some stipulations involved in saying, in order for you to continue in this process, there's additional TA that would need to occur, and these are the things that we're going to want to support you around. So the provider would have to know potentially that we realize there's some violations and we still want to work on continuous quality improvement, and there's going to be additional requirements of you in order to be a part of this. And so I think there's going to be there's going to be different plans for different programs depending on how that has occurred. And there could be a point where a program has sort of enough things on their record that when we initially started down this road, we said we're willing to kind of go into a relationship with this program, and then that may be reevaluated just depending on new things that arise.
Yeah, thank you both, Andy and John, for commenting on that. One, I would just like to caution, what would that look like in a newspaper or on Facebook if a preschool promise awardee has complaints, right? So that's what I fear. I'm going to get some feedback or pushback from our community here if that happens. So that aside, the piece about taking a look at the 900 hours and working on that, I really urge you to look at it equitably and understanding the barriers that family childcare does have and the barriers that school districts don't have, right? And so really tailoring each type of program differently. Expectations, if you have expectations that it can be done virtually, but yet you're still giving, still certified families or RFs are having to provide the care, that has to be a rewarded piece, right? Because that is not helping families work if it's done virtually. So just have to say that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Karen. And then just one final thing I forgot to mention. I just wanted to let everybody know that we are working on finalizing a set of FAQs that will go up, and I can share that out with everybody once they're finalized, and we'll have some additional information, or at least a place to go to or point to.
Thank you, Andy and Dana. And it looks like there's still some clarification needed around when children would be in seats. A timeline. Would you just clarify that again, please?
I can say that right now, where we have been landing is October 31st, and that's been shared. But I would again say to continue to check the frequently asked questions when that comes up, because as we know, things do change pretty rapidly in our current situation. So that's the answer for today, is where I can land on that.
Thank you. All right, I'll just call out one more time. Is anyone who has a chat question? Looks like Lynette.
So is that October 31st the enrollment date, or children actually receiving services?
Receiving services, but again, I would caution everybody to remember that it may change again.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's this pandemic thing. We just don't know what's going to happen. It's just so, let alone all the other things going on.
Did you
so
fix
Mary,
that
did you have more questions? Yeah, I'm trying. So Mary, it looks like you have some questions. Do you want to go ahead and ask them? That'd be great.
I'm just clarifying that if the start date is October 31st, the 900-hour expectation remains.
I would say that for right now, until you hear otherwise, but these are all pieces that we are working out with our guidance to be fair and equitable to our program, knowing that we are in a very different time than when the RFA was released.
Thanks.
I think that's the grace we need, continually remembering that RFA was written in a different era. So Eva, it sounds like you have another question.
Yeah, it's a really simple one, and just to make sure that I don't misunderstand, when you say, Andy, watch this space, that the date may change, you mean that the date may change to be later, correct? Not that it could become earlier, that kids would need to be in seats earlier.
That would be my assumption, but I also, I mean, I can imagine a world where if all of a sudden everybody turns back in their contracts and things are better and they're like, no, we can all get them in on October 1st. But I don't anticipate we would back up on that. But yeah.
Thank you.
Great. And I will go ahead and, oh, Shannon, you're raising your hand. I'm sorry, I didn't see that. Go ahead, Shannon.
It's simple. Just wondered if hubs are going to get this information about the enrollment, or talking about, you know, this early on, the preschool promise, like just be careful and all that. The slide and everything, are they going to get all that?
Shannon, actually, that's a great question. So this information was shared with the hubs because the hubs wanted to know, like, what can we do right now? We know that you're an intent to contract, so they receive a pretty similar slide recently through coordinated enrollment, I believe, at their last hub directors meeting.
And it was tailored for all of you today, but there was one that was specific to coordinated enrollment. So great. And then Karen, yes, Karen Hinkemeyer, yes. We, as soon as we are able to get the information in the staffing, your budgets and your roles, we will probably call a separate meeting and we will just dive into that with the CCRR directors. So it will be a very focused conversation with just all of you to really get that moving forward and get clarifications and have time for questions and answers and problem solving, all of those things. So it's going to be very, as soon as we have that, which we're hoping will be within the next couple of weeks. All right, any other questions? One more time, a great conversation. Andy and Dana, thank you so much. So let's go ahead and start, move on to the next agenda item, which, and I'll go ahead and take the screen back, which is about intentional referral meetings. First of all, we're all applauding internally. We want to thank all of you for your timely submission of deliverables. So all of your deliverables are in. You know, so it's great, wonderful, yay. And we give credit to Sandy for that, and Lisa.
Well,
oh, sorry, John, you too.
No, I would say credit to all of you for getting it in. Sandy for being the person so capable of tracking that we had them all.
Yes,
that's
it.
Quite impressive, yeah.
Yes, that's it. Thank you, John. Good clarification. So as we move into these next 6 months, talking about intentional referral, before Lisa left, I know she called together a group to just take a look and kind of do an evaluation on intentional referral. So this is a draft revised agenda, and this came from the feedback of CCRR directors and licensing specialists going over what might be the best way to go after actually doing it, what could be improved. So this is the agenda that I sent out attached to the invite, so you will find this in the invite. And once again, these meetings must occur at a minimum of twice a year per CCRR region. So with at least one in-person meeting per year, which we can talk about. We don't know when this pandemic will be lifted. We would certainly want to encourage you continue to do remote to stay safe. So we've made a few changes. One is required attendees. We actually aren't even listing the union in here because there were some concerns around possible conflict of interest as far as any case management with providers. So should you decide to invite the union and have them be part of it, you would just want to have them as part of the conversation that does not include like getting into talking about intentional or an intensive support of a provider. So you just want to keep that as confidential as possible. So the required attendees are OCC staff and CCRR staff that serve the region, and then the optional attendees are listed here. Then we would ask that the CCRR director or appointed contact set the time and kind of, you know, coordinate the meeting. And then the facilitators be the either the licensing regional managers or the CCRR directors, and that would be, of course, your choice. There is a whole thing on confidentiality and then also preparing for the meeting. So that gives you basically, I believe that was all in there before, but the agenda is a little different. It's actually broken into 2 sections. So the first 90 minutes, it could be up to 90 minutes. Of course, it may not be that long, but there would be an introduction time, an update time, and opportunity for questions, dialogue. And then the break would excuse the optional partners and then transition to specifically intentional referral purpose. So that would be really looking at if there's any kind of follow-up or TA needed for a provider, any concerns that you guys can share, and then any problem solving or trends in the field. So are there any questions about this draft? Any thoughts that you want to share? And yes, it's absolutely okay to use this, and I will send it out after the meeting with draft off of it if you guys are ready to rock and roll with it.
This is Sydney. I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who, in addition to putting their notes that have already happened in the smart sheet, sending it to me, because that was on the original template. You no longer have to send them to me though, because we have the smart sheet set up. So if you want to just send it to smart sheet, you don't need to email them to me as well. I have access to that smart sheet too. Yeah, and here it is. Thank you, Sydney, who only asked me 3 times to remind everyone that. So thank you for reminding me to say that. So, submit notes via smart sheet within 2 weeks of each meeting. And just so you know too, these notes are so informative for us. It is another really solid connection to what's happening in the field and what's happening with all of you. So they're great to read and very, very informative. So thank you for doing this. All right. As far as a minimum meeting time, we don't really have that, but we would, that's not specifically called out, but we would want it to be meaningful and purposeful, and especially if you're only doing it twice a year. So we would imagine an hour and a half would be very, you know, a very, I guess, length of time that we would want to see. If you're doing it 4 times a year, you may find you only need an hour. So kind of use that range, hour to hour and a half. Oh, I said that wrong, sorry. 90 minutes is each section, so sorry. I would say 2 hours to 3 hours, depending on how often you meet. Make sense? All right, and Melinda is saying that as an optional partner, you would like to extend your program's interest in participating. She'll be connecting with each of you. Thank you, Melinda. All right. No further questions. How are we doing on time? Great. All right. So let's take a 5-minute break. It's almost 11 o'clock. So let's all come back at 11:05. 7 minutes, 8 minutes.
Hi, everyone. Why don't we go ahead and get started? Come back to the meeting. You were all close by, I could tell. Okay, welcome back. The next in line here is John. He's going to talk through some reminders regarding our protocol for site visits, which would also now incorporate virtual site visits. Okay, John.
All right. Sorry. I love this way GoToMeeting. I would love to figure out who we have to complain to get the classic version of GoToMeeting back, but every time I share my screen, then I can only see like 5 of you. So, so the ones that smirk at me the most, I've put you on the top of the screen so I can see what your facial expressions look like. By the way, there's no way for me to do that, but it would be great if I could put the 5 that smirk at me up top. But anyway, so this particular subject is related to something that you guys may remember. We put out some guidance around health and safety concerns and when staff who do TA in our system, when they need to report that sort of thing to the Office of Child Care. And is that ringing a bell? Does anybody remember that particular conversation? I'm seeing some heads nod. So that was around February, which seems like it really wasn't that far away, but it feels like it was eons ago. So we wanted to take an opportunity to just remind everyone about this process, and especially since we're also utilizing TA logs, and there's a section in there around the health and safety concern reporting. And so I just wanted to make sure that we're getting it back on the radar screen, and that anyone who has staff in our system who provide TA that could witness in a child care program that some sort of a health and safety concern or some health and safety rule has been essentially violated. I just want to remind everyone what the process is and sort of what we're expecting in the TA log related to that. And so as you can see, there was a memo, and I think we actually have it attached in the meeting invite. In case you want to refresh your memory up close, you can grab it up and take a look. But there's a memo discussing which partners would need to essentially adhere to this process. And then it describes both what the mandatory reporting requirements are, which I think this area is something that we've all been working on for a couple of decades around just, who's a mandatory reporter, what types of things do you make mandatory reports on, and where do you call, and all of that information. And I think the amount of exposure that we've had to that makes it fairly simple for us to understand when we make reports and where those reports occur. But then the newer guidance around this that comes into play with folks who are providing technical assistance, where you might bump into areas of concern. There's 7 areas that we want to make sure are being that we're following a distinct process around when they arise. And so I'll go through them in a minute, but I think I want to kind of reflect back, and I think maybe this came up in our February time frame, but I want to reflect back to when I was in the CCRR system and what we've really tried to achieve on behalf of supporting childcare providers in our system. Licensing has a very distinct role, and CCRR has a distinct role, but there is areas of gray where we want to ensure that anyone who is in a professional development role with childcare providers understands the magnitude of what needs to be reported and when. And I think it has been a practice in the past where CCR and our staff might have witnessed, let's just say the top one, a ratio issue in a program, and said, hey, you need to get somebody in here right now to make sure you're within ratio. And it was corrected on the spot, and everybody kind of goes back to good, and we move on. Same thing could happen with like a chemical, like a cleaning chemical that's within reach of children. You know it's a licensing violation. You might see that on a countertop or in the bathroom in a spot where children could reach it, and you might say, hey, you got to have this stuff locked up. Make it happen right now. The provider takes care of it. Everybody kind of goes back to business. That was the old practice, and I think we still have a lot of staff who are scared and worried about what it does to their relationship with a provider if they're deemed to be sort of a monitoring type person, or that they could get dinged while someone who is a TA professional is in their program. And I think without going too far into depth on this particular subject, every program that is funded by the Early Learning Division is an extension of the division. And so even though our CCR&R system is not technically in the role of regulation and licensing, they're in support of those minimum health and safety requirements. And when we have a serious health and safety issue, we just want to make sure that the new way that I would hope that every provider understands what's going on here is there's never going to be a time when a serious health and safety concern arises that you're not going to get called on it. And there's consequences to that, unfortunately. And so I think the big piece we just wanted to make sure everybody was working closely with their staff on is that we don't want to slip back into the pattern where we're telling folks that you know, this is a violation, but just take care of it right now, and we're just going to let it go. Because, and just bear with me on this, but worst case scenario for me in the situation, I don't want to have any one of our CCR and our staff, or anyone in our system for that matter, having to grapple with in their mind is, let's say you know, one of your staff corrects an issue on site and walks away from it, assuming that the provider is sort of learned their little lesson and they're not going to do this stuff again. And then 2 weeks later, a child dies in their program. That to me is the worst case scenario, because then we've abdicated our role. We've given a provider an opportunity to make a mistake that has created an issue in our system where a massive mistake can occur. And we've seen it, it's happened. And I just want to make sure that as I'm sort of stressing the need for us to ensure that we're reporting these things forward and doing it within the process, that there is still a real sweet spot for quality improvement specialists to build trust, to be understood as a professional that can help a childcare provider do the type of work that we all want to help them do. But the provider knows and should be aware and should not be naive to think that anybody in the system who is looking at helping people provide quality in services would not want them to follow the bare minimum health and safety requirements. And that's what licensing is. And so, yes, your folks are not licensing specialists. However, you're there to help them exceed licensing requirements. And if they can't meet the bare minimum, they shouldn't be doing it. And so my soapbox has been stood on. And now I'll go through this little section here, and then we can talk about questions here in a little bit. But the 7 areas, of course, ratios and group size, all those kinds of things need to be maintained at all times. Any sort of unsafe guidance or discipline that the provider is providing to children that you witness, and this could be virtually. Any children left unsupervised for an extended period of time, and I know there was concerns about what's an extended period of time. I'd want you to use your judgment. If it made you nervous in any capacity whatsoever, it's an extended period of time. And there's links in this document that lead you to licensing regulation snippets from the regulation manual, so you can see what the true intent of the rule is, and then make a decision. And what I would say is supervisors and directors in our system, if your staff are confused as to when they should, if it doesn't feel clear, and on site they kind of have them correct it and they're teetering on, was this serious, was this not, have them staff that with you. And there is no reason why you can't go back to that provider and say, I had you correct this, but as I left, I realized we should have reported it. And unfortunately, I have to report it forward, and I would like you to also self-report. If you didn't do it on site in that exact moment when you could have, I just think there's a chance to do what's appropriate and what's right. So anyway, that's where the gray areas are. A lot of these are not that gray. They're pretty simple. Infant safety risks, I'll tell you, I've heard it multiple times that licensing specialists go out, and one of the most often kind of violations that are occurring is that we still have unsafe sleep practices, even though there's a required training and everybody knows it's back to sleep. There's things in the crib that shouldn't be there. There's kids sleeping on their tummy that have been laid on their tummy. Kids sleeping in car seats, sleeping in swings, all that kind of stuff. So that one's a big one. And the fact that I got to say infant out loud today means that I still am an infant toddler specialist. I still have some role in working with infants and toddlers and your folks that do that work too. So I feel good. So their safety is the minimum though. Any of these other kinds of safety concerns, like folks, I think one of the big ones that comes up a lot, at least I seem to hear about it a lot, and maybe it's because when I hear about feces, it makes me stop and think, but feces is not funny when it's on the playground and kids are trampling through it and tracking it into the house. And family child care programs that have dogs as their house pet, it's sort of a regular occurrence. And so we have to sort of teach from the perspective that just like a Head Start staff person takes a morning stroll around the playground to look for hypodermic needles and all of the weird stuff that ends up in a playground in the morning before the kids go out, the family child care provider in their home environment should be making that stroll too. And I think feces might be one of the things that needs to be found most often. And so we don't want them to have those violations. We've actually had people out on TA visits and they've stepped right in it. So it's not uncommon. But there's plenty of other things there, like the chemicals we were talking about, firearms, hot tubs that are uncovered, facilities in disrepair, broken stairs, that kind of stuff. Anyone who has unsupervised access to children who is not in the criminal registry or has not been cleared or they're conditionally enrolled, you may not run into that as often. We're not asking you to be the police and figure out who all these people are, but if you have some awareness that they have not kept their criminal background registry up to date, or they're a person who doesn't have clearance, then of course you would report it. But that one's a little harder for you to ascertain, but if you become aware, report it. And then illegal care, that's always a biggie. And I think in many of our rural areas, our staff have come upon people who are providing care in a way that is not sanctioned by our rules and regulations, and making those reports is critical. So I think that's all I wanted to say. I cannot see any one, but about 4 of you. And now I'm looking at the chat box. What do you got for me, Margie?
Well, first of all, I think let's start with Toby. She has a specific question, and then we also have kind of one focused question in the different chats. Go ahead, Toby.
So my question, and I've dealt with calling the number on illegal care. They keep telling us if we don't see it, we can't report it. Even if we see them on Facebook advertising for slots. Because when we, like in our area, when we see things on Facebook, when we were able to go out, we would go out there, introduce ourselves to them. They would never let us in the home, but we know they're doing care. And so we've reported it, and we've been told over and over again, if you don't see it, don't report it. You can't report it. So this interesting thing happened last week was in one of my counties, they have a neighborhood Get to Know Your Neighbor magazine. And on the front cover was featured a woman that's been providing illegal care for 16 years. She talks about being a provider. We haven't seen it. So how do you do that? Like, staff reached out to her, letting her know what the rules are, but we have physically not seen it with our own eyes. How do you report something if you have not seen it? It's in the paper or somebody talks about it, but you physically have not seen it.
So, John, can I jump in?
Yeah, love it.
My ear perked up and I got back on camera. Thank you, Toby. Are you saying that our central office is saying that they won't take those reports?
Well, we've called them, but licensing, we had an incident maybe a year ago. And somebody from OCC called me, or OCC, they called me and said, if we have not seen it, we can't report it.
Okay, I mean, that doesn't.
So that's what I don't.
My understanding of our policies, and so what I would suggest is that those calls go to our central office number. Those are our official complaint takers.
That's where we call.
Okay. And so I will definitely follow up with them. What I can tell you too is last year in the legislative session, there was some new wording put in specifically around illegal care that also directed us to take a broader look. And so I don't know whether that was an old message, but I'll certainly follow up with our compliance team because, I mean, I've been here 20 years and I have never felt that message, but clearly somebody's told you that. So I'll definitely follow up. And if you know of any, because we know a lot of those smaller communities do have care happening that you guys are aware of, and we do want to follow up on that. So please make those reports and I'll follow up with our compliance team and make sure that they're aware, okay?
So my question about the girl in the magazine, it just says that she provides, or she's been providing care for the community. We don't have, my staff reached out to her and said, hey, this is what's going, you need to do this, there's that. Do we still just need to call it in and tell them? Because I don't know her name. She's on a front cover of a community magazine, a small rural community magazine about getting to know your neighbor. Somebody featured her, and we've been trying to educate our communities to let them know things. So I was surprised that she was published. And then, of course, we see all the newspaper articles and the ads saying we're going to open childcare. And I tell staff to let licensing know that, this was in the newspaper, just so they have a heads up on it. But like I said, I was physically called by somebody in the office not even a year ago saying, if we don't physically see it, we can't report it. So that's, my staff are confused because of an incident in one of our communities. A provider that was suspected of doing illegal care was turned in, and I guess she lashed at licensing when licensing showed up and then accused us. It just this big blow up.
Yeah, I think I know which scenario you're talking about. And I don't know if the message that got confused is if we don't have the ability to confirm it's happening, we can't give a valid finding, but we still go out to assess it. So maybe that's where the confusion happened, but I will definitely follow up with our legal and compliance team because we do want those reports. And
yeah, because we've called in several times of people that we know and nothing's happened. They're still providing care. And so staff get tired of, like, they feel like they're not the police, and they've called and called and called and nothing's happening. So how do you, I don't know how to handle that situation if somebody's doing it and it's been called in multiple times.
do you have, I mean, when you say nothing's happening, we hear that a lot with CPS too, that people say, well, I call CPS all the time and nothing changes with the family. So I don't know if that means that we went out and we weren't able to prove anything.
When I tried to talk to licensing about it at a referral meeting, they just said they couldn't get into it with us. I just wanted to see if this was followed up on, because we tried to provide support to this person get her license, and she's still providing care. And the reason why we know that is because one of my staff members lives next door to her, so she sees the kids going in and out, and we call again and call again. So it's just a confusion, I think.
Toby, I'm wondering.
Go ahead, Margie.
Toby and Tammy, I'm wondering, let's take this offline, because it sounds like it's a specific concern, and I think it would be great if maybe I would be happy to be part of this meeting. So maybe Toby, Tammy, and me, and we could kind of brainstorm what might be happening and track down the communication and try and resolve it.
Well, I just know it happens in all the communities, and there's specific ones. It's just a continual, and we just don't know what else to do.
Yeah,
because I don't feel like we should be that part,
how
but
we can resolve it.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Margie.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Tammy. Thank you, Toby. So back to some of the questions that are in the chat box. It looks like there's questions around the pods that are being talked about as far as where they fit. And so, Tammy, this may be going back to you, or we have a question that we're going to problem solve, and that is the K-3 pods for working parents, and then the providers doing the virtual schooling in these pods in their programs. Hannah, did I get that right?
Well, I'm just seeing a lot of parents stepping up that are at home, and they're saying, I'm taking 6 kids, it's $500 a kid, I'll do virtual school with them. I have 1 spot left for a K-3 child, and I've seen it consistently, and I'm just saying in my community, and this is like a private Facebook group for my surrounding streets, and parents are struggling to know what to do when they have to work. And so my thing is this something that is technically legal care, and we should be like, hey, you should probably look at getting licensed because you have kids ages from kindergarten to 10 years old. And so I think it's something we're going to see statewide, and it seems like people are commenting, they're seeing the same thing. And so is this technically illegal care, or is this something that is, part of licensing? Is it part of, where does it fall for us to support, whether me being a private citizen versus me and my work as my job? So it's tricky.
And it seems like parents are thinking the number of kids is like 5 to 6 for those pods. For some reason, that's the number that keeps coming up.
So I saw that there's actually an agenda item later today that I think Leslie is leading, and I don't exactly know the direction that is going. We know that there are several things that can make somebody exempt from care. If they're only caring for 3 or fewer children, then they could be exempt. But if they're doing care for more than 3, then that would be illegal care. And so what we would encourage is that, they're reaching out to a licensor to ask those questions.
Okay. And
I feel like
yes.
Well, I feel like right now parents don't understand that it's childcare, and they think that they're providing like a private school setting to these kids. It's confusing for them.
It really is, and we're working on, just earlier today, I did an hour-long meeting with licensors as we tried to go through all these different scenarios that we're getting calls on, and I opened up that meeting with basically saying this is the hardest topic that we've had during all of COVID. Very, very hard, and we're going to make some mistakes, we're going to stumble, we're going to give out some information today, and tomorrow it's going to be different, and we're also going to give ourselves permission to just do the best we can right now. And so the licensors have been provided some information so you can refer people there. We're also working on a flowchart document that we would be able to make public to try to support and answer those questions. It's incredibly hard, and we know that parents are just doing the best they can during a really hard situation. We also know that we have the legal authority over everything that's out there, or the practical ability to see all of it. So lots of scenarios happen, and we're going to do the best we can to walk people through that contact, and working on a document to have public facing.
That will be helpful. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And you're right, Tammy, we are going to be diving into some of the school conversation, and this probably will be part of it today. So that's, thanks for pointing that out. We do have a question too about reporting preschools that are not recorded. Is that something that would be a role of a CCRR? Any thoughts on that?
So if the CCRR knows of a program that should be a recorded preschool, should they report it? Yep. Yep, it really should.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Thanks. And then also there's the migrant care, now that OCDC is closed, currently closed. Have you guys, has there been any other discussion about that?
Not on my end from licensing, Margie. I don't know on your end or from when, but not from licensing.
So this is Mary, and Charlie Bauer is very concerned about what is going to happen to those children that need care. And
yeah, I did see that.
I don't know. I don't know the answer.
Yeah, that's just yeah, absolutely another need that's definitely coming up. So, and then Taya and Danae are talking about kind of the homeschool co-ops, some that may include nannies with multiple families sharing one nanny.
Yeah, so, and that does follow into care that needs to be licensed, and so questions, send them to the and I would say send them to the senior licensing specialist in your area.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, John.
Oh, I was just saying I saw Hannah with a hand raised after you get done talking, Margie.
Oh, no. Go ahead, Hannah.
I wanted to see about that document that you guys are working on, Tammy, if there are talking points that we could pull from it so we can give things to 2-on-1's team about exactly who to refer them to while they're talking to parents. Hey, understand this is what you need to do if you're going to set this up with families. And I really want to make sure that even R&Rs have talking points when they're talking with providers, or anything that you can give us now, because it's sadly August and I feel like it's going to be a rough 4 weeks.
It is, and in the document just isn't ready yet. I would say we have a few things that we're still trying to work out with Department of Education, because I think some of these scenarios, like we're having private schools contact us to say, hey, come and license our private school during the day, and we have to watch out that that's not just a ruse to be able to continue to offer their private school education under licensing. So we're working through it, but don't have it ready yet. Ultimately, and I started to put a list of all the senior licensing specialists in the chat box, but I accidentally hit enter too soon. So I'm going to put a list of all their names so that you know who to send those questions to.
Thank you. And I understand it's messy and it's tricky. So thank you, Tammy.
And also, this is really helpful as far as, again, hearing the what's coming from the community, things that we want to make sure we know. We won't necessarily have answers. There are a few questions that Amy just sent me specifically to ask all of you. Instead of taking this meeting time, because we do want to cover a couple more things, we'll send it in a separate email. But they're specifically about what you're hearing from programs as they're starting to open, talking about, again, CPR first aid and the face-to-face hands-on meeting or trainings. So I think that once we're finished with this meeting, we'll get out this information and ask all of you to send that. But it's also good to hear, especially as we're moving into the new year, the new school year, what's coming up as well. So all the
Margie,
stuff that we're hearing. Yeah, go ahead, John.
I was going to say one thing to seal up this particular agenda item, and then we can move on. And any other things that come up in the chat about reporting care, we'll ignore intentionally. We won't even read them, so we can move on. But the TA log, I just wanted to make a quick comment. So the TA log section that if your staff person is on a virtual call with one-on-one with a provider and somehow they witness one of these health and safety violations, the TA log has a section where they log that in. And it's not for you to put your detailed notes or your staff person to put your detailed notes about that situation. We would want them to jot down whatever notes around how they handled it. And then when they call the Office of Child Care and make their report, really the documentation of the incident is on the Office of Child Care side, the real sort of details of that conversation about what the incident was. We don't really want that detail in the TA log. We just want it logged that there was one witnessed and that you went through the process to report it appropriately. And then if you have detailed notes, that can be kept in whatever way you guys keep your detailed note complaints. It doesn't need to be logged in the TA log. So that's that. If anybody has any other questions about it, you can catch me offline. And back to you, Margie.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, John. So just some good reminders about this and also good things that came up as far as more to watch for as we navigate all of these changes. So the next thing on the agenda has to do with the quarterly report, which is right around the corner for the third quarter. What we wanted to let you know is that we're still holding the August 14th due date for your report. We're going to send out the revised version. It basically is going to ask for quarter three how you responded. Again, we're still in a state of emergency, so share with us how you provided these services during the state of emergency. So it is going to be following the contract deliverables, and it is going to ask how you maybe changed a few things specific to respond to. So for an example is the training and professional development section that asks about training. You don't have to list all the training you've done because we will get that from TRI. However, did you offer virtual meetings? How was that done? What was the response? And specifically, did you offer them or was it state shared? So for example, Marion Polk Yamhill has a platform that people are using. And then we'll have an opportunity when we get back into our learning dialogues to talk through what you may need to continue this. Perhaps do it for you if you need a platform. So that's just an example, but it is going to be asking what you did to modify during the state of emergency and how you were able to respond to the services. Again, we don't expect that it's going to be exactly like it's laid out in the contract deliverables because there's a lot of things you can't do. So anyway, that's kind of it in a nutshell. And like I said, I'll actually be working with Beryl to get that out, but I want to send all of you the template so you can see what it looks like. And that way you have an idea. So you could maybe copy and paste what you've been doing into the template that Beryl will be sending through FormSite. Any questions? Lynette, are you waving your hand?
So when do you expect that to be ready? We just need to get that. In order to meet our deliverable date, I need it sooner rather than later. Today?
Yeah, I'll send it to you today. Yeah, you'll get it today. So everyone will get it, the template, and you can start working in it. And then the form site, I think that should turn around pretty quickly too, but you could then copy and paste into the form site. That makes sense?
Thank you.
Sure. Any questions? If you have concerns, reach out to either John or me, whichever one of us is your person. And since Lisa left, Shannon and Nancy, I'm your person.
And I added Clackamas and Northwest Regional. Lucky you guys.
Thank you, John. All right. So that gives us now time. So to set the next agenda item is school-age childcare. We've already started a little bit of discussion around that, but I know it's different because you were talking about parents setting up these pods and what that would look like as far as licensing. But there have been questions, some of the things that you've been asking, and you're hearing from providers, and what are we going to do with the distance learning kids? I mean, how, and school-age children, when we didn't have slots for them until after school, now they're going to need childcare. So, so why don't we go ahead and get started? Leslie is going to facilitate that, and we can be taking notes and listening and brainstorming.
Yeah, so excuse me, it feels like we've already started the conversation a while back here, but I think I want to turn the corner a little bit away from the parent conversation and talk more about the questions that providers have about managing their day and what the expectations are around school-age curriculum. And are they to be expected to sit down and become a school teacher during the day while managing preschool and younger children on site? So I think it's more about what kind of information that we give to providers around that, and then being able to make informed decisions about what to expect. There are some providers that do want to jump in and be able to help and are expressing difficulties with maybe their children at multiple schools, and there's going to be different kinds of curriculum. Maybe there's 3 different teachers for the same second grade year, that kind of thing. And then there's questions being posed about when we get to this hybrid model, what about us maintaining our stable groups when we have a child that is now going into a building with lots of other children and now coming back to the space, and now I don't feel safe or comfortable about my own being exposed to COVID in that kind of situation. And so we're just looking more of a discussion and you guys sharing those questions and being able to really sit down and think through for individual programs about some strategies around that and thinking ahead before those questions come up. And I'm sure you've heard these things as well. And so there's more questions and answers about managing their day and what they're comfortable doing. And I know you guys are hearing this now. And it's going to be creative and it's going to be different for each site. I think we'll always defer back to licensing, but there's also questions about new sites being able to expand childcare, pop-up sites as we call them. Will that be allowed for school-age care? And as we heard earlier, is this just a ruse for private schools to extend their day? So all of those things are licensing questions, but it's more about conversations and problem solving for individual providers and what is the R&R's role in that. And I think it's going to be just sharing creative solutions around that, and also letting providers know, if things are outside their comfort zone around running their individual business, what are the parameters? What can they set up for their individual business? If they're not comfortable doing school-age distant learning, what does that look like for their program? And also, there's also been questions come to us about can they deny care for children who are, once we get this hybrid model, them going back and forth to school programs and potentially bringing COVID back to their programs? And so I don't see a lot of guidance. And I think some of
you have a hand raised too, just so you know.
I'm sorry, what?
You have a hand raised too.
Okay, and I can't see anything other than individual screen. So who has a question?
Shannon.
Shannon.
Hi, Hi, this is Shannon. I'm wondering if it would be possible to bring this discussion with our QISs. Like, I don't know if it could be a go-to meeting with our QIS, because they're coming to me going, I don't know what to do. I don't know. I want strategies. And so what if we could work together and build some strategies as now, you know, we've got a couple of us here that have some ideas, but I think if we got our QISs out there together doing this as well, we might even get more. So I think they're really asking for some of that peer-on-peer support, or just a conversation, not just me. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, I think that that's a really good strategy to set up so we can share some of these, you know, some of this information, because we're all thinking about the same things, and school is starting yesterday in our minds. So,
yeah, that's kind of something. This is Melinda. We've been talking about the same thing as our team. Is we're getting, as everybody else, a lot of questions around, okay, I have these children, they are receiving special education services. What are my responsibilities as a provider for this family that they've already been in my care? What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to do this? So I think that, and we're talking about coming up with some tip sheets or some ideas on how to help support providers, knowing that it's going to be look different in every situation. So I'd really like to be part of that conversation as well, of what are we going to do to be proactive to help share information for providers, because it's coming up.
right. And so, Shannon, you're already planning to have this with QISs and maybe sharing? Are you talking about sharing amongst different SDAs?
Yeah, I would love it if all the SDAs could get together virtually or somehow, and kind of create our own tip sheets, or you know, we're doing these meetings that are in groups for the Sydney has set up. You know, we could do that, the same thing for QISs on this conversation.
Yeah, this is Sydney, I was gonna suggest that, you know, I sent out the doodle poll for the session for the guidance, and there was a runner-up time, which was on Monday. So we could potentially get people together at that time. Not everybody would be able to come, because there's just not ever a time that everybody can come. But we could set up that time, and I can look real quick and tell you what time that was. Otherwise, you know, we can always send out another doodle poll and try and find another time. But just since I had one out already, let me look at it and tell you what time it was. Oh, that's the wrong thing. It was on Monday, I know that, Monday the 10th.
I think it was 1 to 3, Sydney.
With that, well, I'm looking for the actual time. 1 to 3. Okay, so Monday 1 to 3. Is that too short a turnaround? I mean, we could basically just bring people together and facilitate that. You know, do the same thing as we're doing in the guidelines discussion, break people into small groups and have them share with each other, and then share back all of the notes from all of that out again.
I think that would be great.
Yeah.
The TRI could facilitate that with Zoom, right? We don't have that.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe we can have Maria has the Zoom that can set that up, and we'll gather some ELD and TRI folks to volunteer to lead that. Or, I mean, if we're having QIS and inclusive partner folks, you could just, I could send out a template and you could identify somebody in each group to take notes as well. And just brainstorm, but it would be helpful to know if there are any specific guiding questions that you think would be good to have available in all of those groups for people to think about, and then we can, so we can all kind of be thinking towards the same direction.
Also, I'm wondering, I think some of you have come up with some ideas, and so if you have tip sheets already, if you have ideas, I think that'd be really important to share. in this meeting.
I see someone wrote that
if you sent them to me, I could get them together and share them. Okay. Oh, go ahead, Leslie, sorry.
Is there another, it said someone wrote in the chat that there's another meeting at the same time, intentional referral meeting for that time, is that?
Toby, would you be able to assign a couple of QISs to join this meeting?
I'm not sure because they were looking forward to talking to licensing about different things just going on and what they can do to support providers. So I don't know if I could or not. I can ask them when we have a meeting this afternoon.
Okay.
Okay. Well, it sounds like, I mean, that would be a really great strategy to share that.
Because I mean, I have the doodle poll out there.
Okay.
Go ahead, Leslie.
Okay, yeah. No, I just wanted to make sure that wasn't a system-wide conflict for that time or not. But it looks like everybody wants to join in and potentially could send a couple QISs that are already gathering these questions from providers to bring to that. And then it looks like we want to come out with that, some kind of FAQ or strategy document potentially that we could use for that time. Because again, people are really getting nervous. This is coming up really soon. Distance learning will start in September, even though the hybrid will start later in many school districts. So I think, you know, we talked a lot earlier about potential problems around licensing stuff, and we'll always give that to Tammy to help with that. But as far as like managing your day, and there's even questions about providers wanting to charge more for this service because it is an additional service, and how do you talk them through that and the rationale through that in this time of crisis. So there's a lot of questions and not a lot of answers that we can come up with together if we do this as a concerted effort, I think.
And also, thanks, Leslie. I also, Christine Waters is suggesting that maybe during this time, or if there is enough time, maybe a follow-up to have some talking points for schools to have an understanding of what it means if providers are helping with this distance learning. So there is some understanding there.
Yeah, I think just a document about what is distance learning going to be in general, even as we heard earlier that people have questions about that for preschool promise and preschool age children, you know, what is our guidance around that and what are our thoughts about that for young children participating in distance learning as well. So I feel like it all kind of touches each other. And Tammy wrote in distance learning and homework does not count against screen time, which is true. But it sounds like some of our providers are just concerned with the fact of that being an option for a preschooler. You know, when we, of course, like in-person hands-on learning, how do we balance that for young children and what does that look like in different settings? So, yeah.
All right. Yeah, and, well, Margie, I just wanted to jump in, on that real quick and just again say that the program unit team is working on what does modified educational services look like in a way that supports preschool children and their families.
Right.
There's more to come with.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So not a lot of answers,
right.
but we have some.
Hey, I just wanted to chime in related to, I think, something Melinda brought up around children with identified special needs, and especially ones that are that have an IFSP or an IEP. And I just recently saw a few slides from our ODE partners from early intervention that they're creating a companion document to the what is the school district's document? It's called Safe Learners.
It's a blueprint. Yeah, Safe Learners. Yeah, that's
that one.
Safe learners, ready learners. Safe
that.
schools.
So anyway, I should have that on the tip of my tongue. But anyway, they're creating a companion document that really focuses on how to support children with special needs, and what does that look like when you're thinking of it in terms of pre-kindergarten programs also. So I think that'll be another tool that's on its way, because I don't think the intention of our preschool opportunities is to do comprehensive distance learning. I think preschool is there for a slightly different function. So more to come on how to support children with disabilities.
And I also saw a concern about access to Wi-Fi and childcare programs too. I saw that come up also.
And then also Mary's point about parents and employers. I mean, there's a real concern around working, with school-age children, and them not being in care, and what will their options be. So all good points, things that we can definitely dive into. So yes, Karen, we did hear about Nike childcare closing, and actually that's one of the things I'm hoping to be able to get from you. And if you want to take a couple minutes and let everyone know, that would be great, but I'd love to hear eventually what their strategy is going to be.
Yeah, so we knew that it was ending, and our contract will end December 31st, which we're really sad about, because that was a good chunk of change, way more than we ever got for Focus Child Care Network to really have a robust network. So we are going to lose that, and the Nike child care centers are closed, and they will not reopen. And the only thing that I know is they will be working with Endeavor, which is, I believe, a higher, corporate kind of system to access supports for child and helping parents do childcare. And I don't know how they're doing it. It's not a good scene. And they had just 500 families being served, plus they had so many on the wait list. So it's a huge, huge problem.
It's going to be wow. Yeah, thank you. Well, listen, the messages that just recently came through chat, and then Karen, your message is really leaving a downer with this closing this meeting. If we could maybe flip that to say, okay, here's our challenge, and we're going to meet it, if not succeed and exceed meeting it, and how we restructure childcare. So they won't be in hotel rooms, they won't be in structures in parks. This is all good to know, though. So thank you, everyone. We're at 2 minutes to closing, and as usual, we often fill up this meeting. So there'll be more to come, and grateful for all of your work in the communities and what you're facing. And we are here to support and hopefully change all of this to come out very positive in the end. So have a great day, everyone. You
ended it early. Good job.
2 minutes.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Everyone.